Welcome, everybody. How are you this morning? Good. Well, not too bright and early, but for us West Coast folks, this is still pretty early. So, thanks, Tim. So probably my favorite subject today, in a word I heard mentioned at least 3 times this morning, everything from the grid mod work to the nuclear discussion this morning. The word innovation was used. And I think it's great that our topic here this morning is innovation. And so today I have, 3 experts on innovation, and we're going to hear kind of what they're doing and their thoughts around that life cycle. So first, I want to welcome John Kochavatr. We like to call him Coach. I just learned
Thank you, Mark.
I just learned that 5 minutes ago. John is the Vice President of Customer and Digital Solutions and CIO of Portland General Electric, where he's responsible for customer solutions, supply chain information systems, 900,000 customers in Oregon, so pretty big. They are looking at being very aggressive in decarbonization targets, reducing greenhouse gas, and serving their customers with those reductions by 80% by 2030, correct?
That's right, Mark. Yeah.
Okay, next to me is, I won't tell him your nickname, Kim,
Thank God.
but next
Well,
to me,
we're allowed to keep it weird here, though, so.
well, that's true. That's true, but I still don't think you want me to use your nickname. But this is Kim Getgen. Kim has become a good friend of mine over the last day. Kim is CEO and founder of InnovationForce, where she is reinventing the innovation process to help utilities make that transition to the cleaner, more reliable and power faster. Real quickly, pretty cool achievement. Kim was recognized for her leadership of the Clinton Global Initiative project to build a predictive grid, and publicly recognized by Bill Clinton himself, President Bill Clinton himself. So congratulations, Kim, and welcome. Last but not least, David, we'd like to welcome David Wade. David Wade is President and CEO of EPB in Chattanooga, a world-class energy and connectivity provider. Many of you know Chattanooga as America's first gig-speed internet service. David led the planning and deployment of EPB's community-wide fiber optic network, which now offers speeds up to 25 gig. So welcome, David, as well. So some good thought leadership up here. I'm going to start, and maybe we'll start on that and work our way down. We heard the word innovation mentioned. David, we'll start with you. What are some of the drivers out there that's driving innovation, and who should we be talking? Who should we be bringing to the table to help facilitate these discussions?
I think you actually bring lots of folks to the table. The more you bring bring lots of folks. But I think one of the things that's drivers ends up being how do you position organizations? I think that becomes a pretty big driver because it starts with what's the mission of the organization. What are they trying to achieve? And for us, our mission is to improve the quality of life in the community. And so we have a mission that pushes us to the future and not a mission that constrains us to what's happening tomorrow. Although tomorrow is important, it's a year or 2 down the road, or 5 or 10, that becomes even the bigger picture. But I think, creating that organizational drive to be better and to look to the future and what that can be, and how do you get more people in your organization excited about that? That to me is one of those challenges as an organization. Sometimes it's just letting folks have the opportunity to make decisions, whether they're big or little. And I think that is one of those drivers that pushes innovation in an organization that has a lot going on, is allowing folks to do things even if it's stuff that appears risky to you or stuff that you wouldn't do that way yourself. So I think one of the drivers is giving folks opportunities.
Okay, thanks. Kim, I know you and I chatted a little bit last night, and I know you've got some thoughts around this as well.
Well, these are the true leaders on the stage, and I'll bore you guys with some of the data. So our company went out and surveyed some trends in innovation, and we asked who owns it, who participates in it, and then who is accountable for it. And so this is what's going on in your workforces, so be aware that a third of the folks surveyed said everyone participates in it, and then a third of the people said, well, everyone owns it. So then who's accountable for it? A third of the people said no one. So what you're seeing on stage today is leaders who are futurists, who have been able to bring innovation into their organizations. And I think my message is brainstorming is not always performing. So we have to build process, procedures, and discipline to make innovation a repeatable and dependable business process for the organization that you all, as managers, can trust. $1.7 trillion is spent on innovation annually, yet only 6% of CEOs are satisfied with their organization's ability to innovate. So it really comes down to how do we build discipline, process, and procedures so we can create those opportunities that David's talking about, and you can really empower your innovators at the front line. You can decentralize the process, democratize it, but empower everyone to be able, who's closest to the problem, to come up with the solution, and then you can manage it and you can actually measure and manage what's going on inside your organizations with a repeatable, dependable process that with KPIs and measurement.
Wow, I think that's great. Good point. You do have to measure, or you don't know you're making progress.
Yeah.
John, I want to pull you into the conversation on this. Agree or disagree with the discipline?
Yeah, I will build, I think, on David and Kim's comments. I will tell you from my perspective, and I'll share a little bit more about Portland General. I think we were the first, we might still be the only U.S. utility that signed the climate pledge, which says we're going to be zero emissions by 2040. So this is not net zero, this is zero emissions. And in fact, we work with our legislator in Oregon to actually put that into law. And so that means 80% decarb on a 2010 baseline by 2030. I think part of innovation, in my opinion, and at least at Portland General, is setting ambitious goals, like setting that BHAG, right, that big, hairy, audacious goal, because that's how you're going to attract and retain the best talent. So that's number one. Number two, Kim, you talked about ownership and accountability. Like, that is giant. And I'm not talking about a team, I'm not talking about a committee, it's a human being. Who is the human that's accountable for delivering specific measurable outcomes? And then the other thing that I would add is when we think about outcomes, at PGE at least, I think about the 4 M's. It's going to be money, megawatts, minutes interrupted, metric tons of CO2 equivalents. And so I'll just unpack that a little bit, if you'll allow me to. Money, we talked a lot about affordability for customers. We're an investor-owned utility, so money goes in all directions. One is trying to do things to achieve customer outcomes affordably, and two is you got to drive returns for investors as well. Megawatts, not only it's at megawatts of growth, you want revenue drivers in terms of megawatts of growth, but when you look at things like virtual power plant, you want megawatt capacity as well. We could unpack, reliable, affordable, clean energy that's tied to those megawatts. There's going to be minutes interrupted. This is, look, if a customer experiences outage, I think that's arguably our number one goal is to make sure that we have reliable energy for customers. And then you've got metric tons of CO2 equivalents for decarbonization. So to the extent that we've got an ambitious goal so you can attract and retain the best talent, you've got clear ownership and accountability, and you're driving outcomes to what we call one of the 4 M's, I think those are the ingredients for driving innovation, at least in our business.
Thanks. I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
I had a session last week, and we talked about attracting and or retaining the talent that was necessary. So I do think that's a key point, and an obstacle that a lot of companies have to overcome. David and Kim, do you see any other hurdles or obstacles to that innovation process?
Well, there's always going to be hurdles and obstacles, I think. I think your innovation really is an obstacle course. If you think about it, because, you start thinking you're going to go this way and it's uncharted and you don't know what you're going to run into, so you may need to go around or go over or go slightly a different direction. So I think if we think about innovation as it is a obstacle course, and I love the conversation a little earlier about, working different muscles. And the ideal that we're building muscles to run this obstacle course, I think that really may be one of the key definitions around innovation.
Wow, great view. Kim?
I totally agree. And this goes down to the process. So with being able to measure each step of that obstacle course, you can get better at how and why. Why are the obstacles occurring, and then how do we build high-performing teams to be able to get through that obstacle course faster. One thing that I would like to inspire everyone in the room is to think about yourself when you go back into your organizations, is that you're the leaders, right, of innovation for your teams. And I would just say one thing: you're creating safe psychological spaces for your teams to come together and collaborate so that all voices in the room can be heard. Sometimes, right, we're in a highly engineering-driven culture. The introverted engineer in the back of the room might be afraid to speak up, right? So our job as innovation leaders is to make sure that everyone's voices is being heard in that discussion. And, I would say it's more about plotting the vision so that there's inclusion and participation. And having the good fight, having the hole punching sessions in that obstacle course, because sometimes when your teams fall down, there's a really good reason for that. So that they have a safe place to be able to tell you, why, what are they encountering, and then how can you get better at helping them to become a high-performing organization or team through that innovation obstacle course. So I hope that's helpful. I mean, I think for everyone in the room, you all are leaders, you're thought leaders for sure. It's about creating that safe space so that all ideas can coexist together, and then you can help them collaborate and work through their differences so that you can get the best idea, not the most popular.
Wow, very good. And I love the way you threw in the word coexist while we're in Austin. I see that on the bumper
Got to keep it weird.
all the time here. Yeah.
Well, and Mark, maybe I'll just add a few things that that I think about, at least, or that we think about at Portland General. One is progress over perfection. You guys have heard this before, but man, when you're in an engineering company, engineers do what they do best, and that's the engineer, right? And I don't mean that as a criticism, because there's a lot of things that we do that's life and death, but most of it isn't. And so we choose progress over perfection. Two, and it's kind of similar to progress over perfection, but it's pragmatism over dogmatism. Man, I'm sure that y'all have been in many meetings where the customer's at a level 2 on something, and we debate whether we should be at level 6 or level 8. 6 or 8, 6 or 8. Meanwhile, the customer's hanging out at level 2, and the pragmatic thing is just get them to level 3 next month. How about that, right? Instead of being in a proverbial ivory tower where we're sort of debating these things. So that's kind of another thing that I would sort of offer to the audience. And maybe the last thing that I would offer, and I've got a lot of other things too, but there's this idea that what I tell my team is the only thing worse than wasting customer money is just wasting people's time. So just call it, right? When you're innovating, you're going to see something. Define what success looks like, define what failure looks like before you get into it. That's my opinion, and that's how we operate at PGE, because if you don't do that, you're going to get a project that just goes on forever, year after year. People are going to ask for money for it, and you're going to wonder, what did we get into this for? Because we haven't defined what success or failure looks like. And maybe the last thing that I would offer to you, and we do this with every project that we do, is just think about Parkinson's Law. And if you know what Parkinson's Law is, it's that work tends to fill the time allotted. So you want to give something 2 years to get done, it'll take 2 years. You want to give something 2 months to get done, you'll find a way to get it done in 2 months. And that's worked pretty well for us, at least. Wow,
Yeah, great thoughts. I had not heard that one before. I didn't know it was called Parkinson's Law, but thank you. Thank you for that. So a couple of really good ideas, right? I heard measuring heard some things from you actually around measuring as well. Any other thoughts or blueprints for maybe how do we bring that innovation cycle in a shorter timeline?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people think of innovation as the long pole in the tent, realistically, right? So what are some of the other thoughts or ideas you have around solving some of these things?
Yeah, I'll throw something out there and we can go kind of in the other direction. I always tell my team, I said, help me understand how, we had a storm that hit us a few months ago, 250,000 restorations. Help me understand how we can restore 250,000 customers in 4 days, but I can't get this thing that I want to do done in 4 weeks. And I think part of it, in my opinion, is because many of us work in corporate offices, right? And it's somehow acceptable that something can take 4 weeks. And meanwhile, our colleagues that are in the field are getting power back on in 4 days for 250,000 people. So I just use that as framing because there is always a path. And I think part of that path is, one of the speakers this morning talked about culture, and I love that. And I'll give you my 2 cents on it. I think show me a dysfunctional culture, I'll show you dysfunctional leaders. I don't think that culture is an uncontrollable thing. And I think that it starts with leadership. And so if you hold the bar high and hold people accountable, I think that's, in my opinion, how you drive a lot of innovation.
And David, I want to pull you into the conversation as well, because you said that this whole thing is obstacles, right? And we have to start learning different muscles. So at EPB, what are you guys doing to try to exercise those muscles
I think
and
it's
navigate those hurdles?
I think it is laying out both those short-term challenges and those short-term opportunities. Right? I mean, I can tell you back when we were looking at going without developing the whole roadmap, right? Is laying out the challenge without laying out the roadmap. When we were started building out our fiber network and we started doing stuff like installing customers, we started off at 50 a day, and I would go to our head of operations that was doing that and say, well, do you think you can get 75 a day? He'd say, yeah. 2 weeks later, he'd have 75. I'd say, well, do you think you can get 100? And 2 weeks later, he had 100 a day. It'd come time, well, do you think you can get 150? And, before long, he was doing 300 a day. But if I'd told him to do 300 a day from the very start, it would have created too much anxiety and fear. And so it's how do you lay out steps in a way that folks believe and create this ability, they believe they can actually do what you're challenging them to do. I think that is one of the, creating a space for them to have confidence they can do something is one of those drivers as well.
That's, that's a good point. It reminds me of Top Gun Maverick, where he's supposed to get to, I don't know, what was it, 9 or 10 Mach, and before you know it, he's pushing 11, right? Yeah. I think the thing there, though, is it's great to push it, but you do have to expect there's going to be some failures as well, too, right, Kim? And you talked about measuring, but expecting to fail. How do you bridge that gap between those two?
So we're all about creating cultures of learning. You learn fast, you don't fail fast. And so if you have an innovation process that's able to capture the learnings along the way, that's the true value. So what we're really helping people measure is to say, not just like how long are we taking in the process, but how much value are you capturing in each step. So if we can create cultures of learning through rapid experimentation, back to the day of Thomas Edison, right? 10,001 attempts to get to the light bulb. If we're able in today's modern society using technology and SaaS and software and AI, how can we not get better, right, at sharing these learnings across our organization so that we can create, inclusive and diverse cultures of learning together? So it's not about, getting it right and sticking the landing. It's about what did I learn, and most importantly was the why. Why did we want to attempt this to begin with that? So we like to say when you create a culture of learning, you start with a really good challenge statement, connect to your mission and goals, as David was talking about earlier, and inspire your teams that what is the art of possible? What is the art of possible? And let them loose, right? And then capture their learnings and share it across the organization so that one person's idea can build on top of the other every single day in your workforce. It's not about a brainstorming session that happens on a whiteboard. These are these water cooler moments that we can now have virtually in these conference calls that we're all in on Teams together, where we're learning through each other. And that's what I get excited about, because it's the collective genius that comes from all of us participating in the process that gets us to the goal.
I love that term, collective genius, right? It takes a village. John, I want to go back to maybe what you guys are doing up at Portland General. Is there a conscious decision to have a diverse group of folks when you're doing this brainstorming? I think one of the things I talk about a lot is the aging workforce, people my age that are, quite frankly, on their way out, and refilling that pipeline with fresh thinking and new individuals, diverse thoughts across cultures, ethnicity. Is that a conscious decision when you guys pull together teams?
For us, it is. And I think that, as I sat through some of the sessions this morning, I'll give an example with customers, because I lead sort of the customer organization too, and I think that everything that we do should start with customers. If I think about our decarbonization goals, like many of yours, and I'll tell you stuff you already know, like we could build 1,000 wind farms on the other side of the Cascades, right, which is where most of our generation is. But you got to get those electrons into your service territory, right, because of the transmission sort of dynamic. So for us to meet our aggressive goals of 80% decarb by 2030, we're not going to do that without getting customers involved. And so in order for that to happen, it's not just the customer team that's doing this, but we have to work with engineering. We got to work with supply chain to get, procure a bunch of stuff to get sort of this, distributed generation that's in the territory. And I think when we think about innovating so that we can meet our goals, measurable goals, right, that I talked about earlier, the megawatts, the 4 M's, it requires cross-functional engagement for us to make that happen. And so it's not even just an invitation, it's kind of like a prerequisite. You have to do that in order to meet some of the more ambitious goals that you've got in the organization.
I guess, Dave, same question for you. Is it top of mind when you guys are trying to solve problems and always take that next stop? Is it a group of diverse thinkers so that you do have that collective team?
Yeah, it has to be a group of diverse thing, I believe. And we deliberate very intentional about making sure we have those diverse groups of folks that bring different perspectives to the table. Because if not, you're missing part of the ideal. You're even missing part of the problem, in a certain extent, if you're not bringing those. I think intentionality around that, bringing not just a group you historically leaned on to solve the problem, but different folks from different areas that bring totally different perspectives to the table.
I can't appreciate that. How do you ensure that those folks feel safe to work together and come up with different ideas while trying to make certain deadlines and targets, right? Is there any kind of magic sauce we should know about?
Yeah, I don't know that there is total magic. I think it is about, encouraging folks to speak up, and sometimes it's having the right people that are not in the room, right? So yep. I think sometimes you find folks that are a little more outspoken, a little more driven, that you have to remove from some of the rooms. and be intentional about that. Not that they can't be a player, but they may be ones that stifle others, and you have to be intentional about removing those from some of the conversations anyhow.
Wow, I love that one. Everybody thinks about who do we bring in the room to the table, but maybe not much thought about who we shouldn't invite in the room. Kim, I imagine you had those same thoughts?
Well, yeah, and so what's really cool about this, because you can actually measure it. Sorry, to measure everything. We are engineers here, and you can't manage what you can't measure. So we look at 41 different cultural KPIs in an innovation process that we could start to see who is sucking up all the air in the room. And we do these innovation pulses as part of our platform that can say after a hole punching session, you know, you guys got everybody together in this obstacle course of innovating together, and now we're at the step where, did I feel heard? Did I matter? Did my voice actually matter in that meeting, and am I feeling heard? And guess what? You know, through surveys and pulse checks of the teams that are innovating in real time, you can actually measure the cultural KPIs. And when you start to look at how your different teams on the front line are innovating together, you could start to see what makes up the high-performing engaged teams versus the disengaged teams. And it's easy. The disengaged teams aren't feeling like they matter or that their voices even, you know, were heard in that meeting, so they just stop speaking up. But when you have the highly engaged, high-performing teams that are saying, I have a safe place where it matters what I say, then you can start to see now through these measurements how your innovation performance is driving the high-performing culture that it takes to repeat and drive growth. So I would say, you know, don't be afraid to measure culture. It's possible today now. We all live in this team's environment, and we can send pulse checks out to people to see how they're feeling in the process. And it is important to know how they're feeling. We do NPS scores to see how happy our customers are. When was the last time you did an NPS score for your innovators? And when was the last time you hugged your innovator? I'd like to say, hug your innovator today. It's time to go onto the front line and make sure that you as managers have hugged your innovator today, because it's a tough battle that they are pushing change in your organization. So their voices matter.
That's awesome. John, have you hugged your innovator today?
I have to check with my HR leader first on that one. So.
I assume you have like rewards programs or a virtual hug, though, to...
Oh, sure. Yeah, we have what are called Spotlight Awards, right?
Okay.
To highlight different leaders and the accomplishments that they've done.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to throw another question out there, and you know, this one might be a little more controversial because, again, I mentioned that innovation is sometimes seen as the long pole in the tent. I think the lady that was up here this morning was talking about the innovation around the nuclear facilities and developments and new tools, and she said it was basically a 10-year demo that we're in. That's quite a long pole. How do you bridge that gap between stakeholder or shareholder expectations in value with what is typically seen as a 10-year innovation life cycle? How do you get them to accept the fact, and when I say them, I'm talking about, again, stakeholders, shareholders. How do you get them to buy into the innovation cycle when the expectation is they want that stock to price to go up in 6 months?
Yeah, you're looking at me, Mark, so I guess you want me to start?
Well, yeah. I'm gonna start with the CEOs, the CIOs, and the.
My opinion on this, right? So it's not an either or, by the way. That is sort of it's a red herring. You got to do both. You got to do both. You got to, you know, it's like the trilemma that we talk about with affordable, clean, and reliable energy. Yeah, you got to do all of it, and I think that's why we all have chosen to work in an industry that's solving some of the world's toughest energy problems. And I think that's what energizes, pun intended, all of us and our teams. And then to the extent that you're doing it for an investor-owned utility like Portland General Electric, that's a given. It's not a choice. It's not like, well, it's not like I tell our board, our investors, like, oh, well, do you want me to do this or this? It's like, yeah. You got to do both. And I think that, so I don't think it's a choice, number one. Number two is, how do you strike the right balance with that? I think that's the beauty of innovation, is that, I'll say something provocative. These are the most fun conversations, by the way. Sometimes I wonder, is it that we don't have enough money, or is it that we have too much money? Because we think that we can buy our way out of solving some of these really hard problems. Because I'm going to hire a consultant to go do something for me. I'm going to go hire some expert. When in reality, I think that for many of us, I think it's about looking in the mirror and being pragmatic and saying, well, look, if I had to do this, how would I do this? And I'll just give you one last example, because I shared this with a group last night. One of the things that I've done with my team is, I was really frustrated when I first joined, when I was getting my group together, because everybody would say, well, John, I could do that, but I need more money and I need more people. And I said, why is it that every conversation I have is about more money and more people? I'm going to put a provocation to all of us in the room. If all it took were money and people, incumbents would never lose. And yet, all of our favorite companies, have been innovated from nothing, right? So I don't think that it's about money and people. It's about drive. It's about grit. It's about creativity. And so I took my team to survival training, because I said, look, if we're cold in the forest, you want me to give you a lighter? Sorry, I don't have one. Oh, can you have any matches? No, I don't have one. All right, you going to roll over and die, or are you going to survive? And so that's part of building this culture, I think, of balancing the expectations of stakeholders, in our industry. So I think you got to dig deep, and you got to find a way to do it.
No, I totally agree. Thanks for that. And David, I want to throw it back to you. As an executive yourself, is there ways or a process by which you maintain that balance or bridge that gap between expectations and the life cycle it takes?
I don't even think necessarily the life cycle is always, there's only one finish line. I think there are multiple finish lines that showing that how you can accomplish things. I'll go back to stuff like when we put in our fiber, and then we automated our electric system. We basically broke our electric system down into megawatt-size pieces that are automated between. We knew that long-term, that positioned us in a great place for adding distributed energy resources, because we already have our system broke up in megawatt-size views. That wasn't what was important to our customers then. What was important to our customers then is they got 50% improvement in reliability. Oh, and also we had to be able to tell them what that meant, because folks don't know what they don't see. That's one of the interesting things, challenges about our industry. If you don't have outages, our customers don't appreciate it because they don't know that, right? So since we were automating things that was typically, we would dispatch trucks and open and close switches if cars hit a post to reroute power. Now that was happening in a matter of a few seconds. We started telling our customers that when you saw that was our smart grid keeping their lights on. So you have to find ways to share what you're doing, both internally and externally, and your incremental progress along the way towards the bigger goals.
Yeah, I love the fact that you're doing both internal and external outreach, because nobody knows what they don't know, right? So you do have to have that outreach. I'm going to give you all an opportunity, because there may be some innovators out there in these chairs, to do some outreach. If you had a 2-minute elevator pitch to say, this is how we innovate and this is how we support innovation to the folks out there, what would you tell them to come and join you at EPB?
Yeah. Well, I think I would tell them that folks have ability to contribute at EPB, first off. And that, because innovation in a culture is not one giant thing that everybody thinks about. It's not magic, really. We think about innovation, I think, as magic, but it really is a lot of hard work. It's about making things happen and being part of something bigger than what you can do yourself. And it's about giving folks that opportunity to contribute at a level that sometimes may be uncomfortable to you or to them itself. Because I think the little things on giving folks drive the bigger things. You know, 'cause I've seen times where there are, you know, I had to learn really, there are times where you go out and if you're not careful, somebody will share a thought with you and you can shut that thought down pretty easy because it don't align with your way, right? And so making sure that it's not your way, that's the only way, because frankly you find out there are many ways to accomplish things, and the more you can allow others to accomplish things, the better off that you can achieve things together.
Wow, great. And I'm going to get back to you in a minute, Kim, but I did want to ask you, John, same thing, 2-minute elevator pitch to the innovators out there. What would you tell them to attract that talent to Portland General?
Yeah, so I started, first of all, I think all of us are innovators. I think if we were all stuck in a forest, I don't think we would roll over and die. I think we'd find a way. So I think that's an invitation to all of you and your teams. You know, and I would say, you know, from a PGE perspective, you know, I shared it when I started the panel this morning, set the bar high, ridiculously high, impossibly high, because the best, in my opinion, that are out there, they want to solve these problems. And if you don't set the bar high, I don't think they want to come work, you know, in your respective areas. And then hold them accountable as well. Because when you start getting that diffusion of accountability, that's where people start to wonder, like, they don't really care about this. Because if they did, somebody would be held accountable.
Okay, thank you. And Kim, I was going to save that for you last, because I know you're driven by innovation by a good friend of ours, Hobo Leo.
That's my dad.
And if anybody wants to learn more about Hobo Leo and Kim's relationship,
Hi, Dad.
please feel free to ask her after the session here. But what would you tell folks as well?
The hardest lesson I had to learn when I was leading an innovation team was, because there's so much that you have to do, right? You're the vision owner, you're trying to make things happen, you're leading a team, you're trying to drive growth, you're gold and measured in every way, right? I had someone take me aside and say, Kim, you're now an innovation leader, you're the spark. You are not the idea owner. You didn't come up with the idea. Your job is to inspire your team to have a safe place and let them solve the problem. That was the hardest thing for me to learn, because it was like a survival instinct for me for almost 20 years that I always had to have the answer. They could throw me into the survival, pit, and it was like, okay, I had to know how to survive to get from point A to point B. And then when it was given to me that now you're the innovation leader in our company, you're the spark. And I got a bracelet that said on my arm, be the spark. My job was to be the vessel. It wasn't about how I answered the question anymore. It was how my team was answering the question and giving them the space and time to creatively come up with the answers themselves. So I know we all have a clock and we have measurements and we have things we need to do, but honestly, we get there faster if we could be the spark and the vessel for our teams to collectively come up collaboratively with the idea and then let them try it out. And you'd be shocked, especially in utility world, when we go into organizations and we say, we're gonna be able to get you through a field trial in less than 90 days, they laugh at us. We get them through field trials in less than 30 days. The hardest part was ideation and knowing what to do with the idea. 200 days we were measuring a utility. It took them 200 days to figure out what to do with ideas. And once we gave them a process and the leadership skills, they were processing ideas in less than 2. So be the spark for your organization, give them the places to know where to take their ideas, and let them solve their own challenges. It's not about you solving their problems. And tell that to your board, because they need to know that as well.
Okay. Hey, that was great. I really appreciate the conversation. I'm going to open up. We got just a few minutes left. Do we have any questions from everyone I can't see from up here?
Hey, great job, by the way. This is an interesting topic, something I enjoy talking about and hearing about. My question is, you guys talked about innovation and developing this culture on that. So the enemy to innovation is the status quo. And I guess my question is, how do you balance that innovation and also avoid falling into that rut of status quo?
Anybody want to go first?
Yeah, maybe I'll start. It comes down to leadership, man. And I'm big on ownership and accountability. And I tell my team, like, when I walk in the morning to my office, there's a Portland General sign up. And it's not like I stop and I wait. And it tells me, okay, John, today you're going to be slow. You're going to be bureaucratic. You're going to say no to everything. That's silly. It's ridiculous, right? So when we talk about culture, sometimes I feel like it's an abdication of responsibility, in my opinion. I'm going to be provocative. So how do you get in front of that? Be the leader. Like, you be the leader. And leadership is as much what you instruct as much as what you tolerate. And there's stuff that happens around us all the time that we tolerate, right? And there's nobody to blame but ourselves, in my opinion. And so I think it starts and ends with leadership.
Can I say something really quick too? So I think it also has to do with burnout. I think, and this is a beautiful opportunity for your organization, as you're driving an innovation process, address burnout. Because I think people are tired, like we're trying to do way more than we can handle in a day. And then we're asking you to innovate and come up with these creative and awesome ideas on top of it. So the PSA that I would say for this is embrace mindfulness. It's really easy to bring meditation and mindfulness into your workplace and help the folks that are innovating and solving the problems, help them address the fact that they're probably burnt out, and really think about that as part of your innovation culture. Because for me, if you could help folks realize that they have safe places to come up with their ideas and collaborate, but also take care of themselves, you're going to be able to drive the best ideas out of your organization. So I just wanted to mention the burnout. It's real. It's happening right now, and we have to address it.
I guess in the last minute, David, same question. How do we avoid that status quo?
I couldn't agree more with both John and Kim on that statement. I think the one thing I would add is that I think that part of our role as leaders is just removing those obstacles from folks. And some of those may be having the wrong folks that may be having too much burnout, or maybe what all pressures are on. But I think part of the role ends up being removing obstacles so we can move forward.
All right, perfect. Well, our time is up. I thank you for the question. I do want to say a special thanks to our guests up there today, David, Kim, and John. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you all.
All right.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, everybody.